Hi, my name is Kerry Critchlow from RCR Recording Studios. Today we're going to be doing a production breakdown of a song called I'm Falling Down. You can actually check it out on our YouTube channel if you want. It's, if you flip through the video section, it's in there somewhere. It was sung by a great artist named Jules, Jewel B. Green. But I'm going to break down the production of it, specifically the instrumentation. There may be a video in the future where I go over the vocals. But what I found was I actually recorded this breakdown a few days ago and realized that it was probably way too long for most people to stay engaged with it. So I'm actually going to break it into two parts. The first part is going to be covering mostly like the drums, percussion, rhythm, that kind of thing. And then the second video is going to be going over more of like the instrumentation, like the bass, the synths, guitars, that kind of thing. And then I may do another video in the future going over vocals, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Before the video begins, I just want to say that if you guys have any questions about anything I'll be covering in this video, please feel free to ask them in the comments. I'm happy to do my best to answer any questions you might have. And if you have any thoughts on other types of videos you'd like to see going forward, please let me know. I'll do my best to try and answer those types of questions or give the information that you guys are actually interested in hearing about. So with that, let's get into the video. Thanks.
So this is a song I wrote, I think, a year or two ago. I can't remember exactly, but I wrote the song and I had a buddy come in and help me sing, and we're not going to go over the vocal aspect of this today. This is more on the instrumentation, and this is mostly just to give you an idea of how to go about designing a song and using the various elements to enhance it and make it pop and shine and all that. Now, you may notice that a lot of this is grayed out right now. I have converted the tracks down to their constituent elements, essentially. So like I've bounced all the drums down to one track, bounced the bass down to a track, synths, guitars, etc. And like I said, we're going to ignore the vocals for today, but we may come back to that at some point. I will be going through each of the elements individually so that you can kind of see what's going on with them, but due to the constraints of how I'm capturing the audio and going through OBS, there's a buffer limit, and so the more tracks I add or have playing at the same time, the more kind of audio glitches that I start to get. So I need to keep those to a minimum. I'm going to do my best to do that. But for now, I'm just going to play you a bit of the song so you can get an idea of kind of what's happening, and then we're going to go through and kind of break down what's actually kind of happening with everything. So yeah, let's just jump into it. I'm going to play maybe the first, 30 seconds to a minute of this song and give you an idea of what's going on. This is kind of a rock song, I guess. You may or may not like this, and that's fine. The whole point of this is not necessarily whether you like the song or not, but just to give you ideas on how you can go about putting your tracks together and producing a song, and what that can entail and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to play a little bit of it for you, and then we're going to go through and get into like what's actually happening with everything. So here we go. Okay, so you get kind of an idea of the feel and vibe of the song and all that kind of stuff. So now I'm just going to play kind of what the drums are doing, and a few things I kind of want to draw your attention to as I'm going through all this is how the song is evolving and changing over time. It starts off pretty simple with just a little synthy kind of stuff going on here at the very, very beginning. And then after a while, what is this, like 4 bars, then the drums start to come in kind of light, and they don't come in fully heavy and big until this chorus over here. And I'm using different drum sets and kits and things like that. I'm not, the bass doesn't come in until, partway through this verse here. And so these are just things I want you to be aware of, because the song is kind of evolving and building as it goes, so that it's not boring, so it's not too monotonous. Things are constantly kind of changing and progressing, even though most of the elements in it are rather simple for the most part. So we'll just start with the drums. I like drums, and I think actually when I was making this song in the beginning, I started off with this drum loop here. Actually, I think this is the drum loop that it started with, right around here. Like I had this, what I'm about to play you, I had this going through the entire song with no changes, and this is what I created first, we'll say, and then I decided that it needed to change. I don't know if you remember from last week, but we kind of tweaked the drums as we went, and this is kind of the same case here. I started with what I'm about to play you, and then I only ended up using that drum section for what I started with for one tiny section of the song, and everything else I tweaked and changed and made a little bit different throughout the song in order to keep it interesting and engaging. So this is the original drum track that I'd come up with. All right, and so that little, this few bars here is the original drum track that I came up with, and then I tweaked it as I went. And so we'll go into the different drums and kind of what's going on under the hood, so you can kind of see what I did here. So for this beginning section here, when it's coming in, these are the drums we were using. I just want to be careful, because if I have too many tracks open at the same time, the audio playback starts to get a little glitchy, and I apologize in advance for that, but it is what it is. It's limitations of how I'm able to actually capture this audio and send it into the OBS system. So we'll just play this beginning section for you, and I've muted the drums, the drum bus here, and you'll still hear the other instrumentation, but you'll kind of see what's happening here with these drums as we go. All right, and so these are the drums here. It's pretty simple. There's no kick. I don't think a kick actually comes in until until the chorus. I mean, I guess we can unmute these for when they do come in. But yeah, so what we have here is a snare, and that's happening on 2 and 4. If we zoom in here. And these were MIDI drums, sounds that I picked out for this song. And so we'll just go through sound by sound. So here's the snare on 2 and 4. Pretty simple. And you may not be crazy about the sound, that's fine. I also layered that snare with another different sounding snare here. And together they sound like this. All right. Now, the important thing here is not whether or not you like that snare sound or whatever. The idea is just to get creative and kind of see, hopefully, what will help you is that you can make your own decisions about what sounds you want, but hopefully this is giving you some ideas about how you can go about getting the sounds you want and how to use them. So as you can see, this is very simple. It's just snare on 2 and 4 this whole time. And these were MIDI. I've converted them to audio in order to process them and things like that. But yeah, we've gone through MIDI. I've just converted the MIDI to audio tracks essentially. But these were MIDI sounds that I put in, and I think I probably played these manually at the time. So I used a MIDI controller, a keyboard, in order to play the sounds out as the song was going. And then we have a hi-hat here. And I don't know if you can notice this, but there's several hi-hat things here. And one of the things I like to do, and this is just a personal preference, this is not going to necessarily work in every genre of music or even appeal to, all musical tastes, but I like to do a lot of layering of hi-hats to get some fun rhythmic elements going, some fun syncopations, things like that. But so for hi-hat 1 here, we've got just, I think, simple quarter notes. Is this? Oh no, they're off. So this is an offbeat. So you'll see what I mean. But like this is happening not on the downbeat. This is just happening every other. Let's go to 8th notes here. So this is happening on the 8th note, or every other 8th note, we'll say. And it gives a fun little syncopation sound. And you kind of get that groove. Now, by itself, obviously, it doesn't sound the best with just that hi-hat and the snare. And you can kind of see where I was going with this maybe once we start adding in some of the other elements. But that's the hi-hat sound that I chose for that. And it's just kind of accenting the offbeat, or the weak beat, if you will, the every other 8th note here as we went. And then we've got a second hi-hat, and this one I think is just doing quarter notes. All right, and then when you put the two of those together, and then we add in the snare. All right, and so you can start to see how this is building a little bit. And again, you don't have to use this little trick that I've used here with, layering a bunch of hi-hat things together, but I like how that kind of starts adding some interest to the sound, some syncopation, some rhythmic differences, that kind of thing. And it just, you can get some fun vibes with that, but you don't have to do this. And I'm using a different hi-hat sound for all of this stuff. This third hi-hat, I think, is kind of like a glitchy sort of sound. So you can see here, and it's not happening very often. It's happening like every couple of bars, right? So it's pretty sparse, relatively speaking. And this is what that sounds like. Yeah, so just kind of a glitchy sort of sound here. And we'll put everything back in, and you kind of hear what that's doing. right? It's kind of like a little glitchy, weird randomness, and just to add a little bit of flavor to the song. And then this one over here, again, very sparse. Not even sure what this one's doing. What's this sound like? Okay, so yeah, very simple, very sparse, and it's just happening every couple of bars again, as you can see. And it's just doing a and it's a different sound again. So when we add that in, yeah, just adding a little flavor, just a little something to grab your attention or just kind of add to whatever. Looks like this is doing eighth notes, but it's accenting every other eighth note, sort of like what this first hi-hat is doing, except it's happening on one beat instead of having every other eighth note. It's like every other eighth note, I guess you can see. So it's not happening here. It's happening here with this one, and then it's not happening, and then it's happening here with this one here. Excuse me. And this is what it sounds like. And I call these hi-hats, they're not necessarily all hi-hats necessarily, as you know, we might come to understand what a hi-hat is, but they're functioning as a hi-hat, and so that's why I've labeled them that way. And so when we play them together again, we get this. And it's subtle. You may not even be able to really hear it in the context of everything. But if we were just to play these two hi-hats together, and it's just accenting a little bit of that beat. Again, it's subtle. You may not even be able to kind of hear what's going on, and you may not even find it all that necessary. That's fine. You don't have to do this kind of stuff. But for me, this was just kind of making this beat here just a little bit stronger, and accenting that in a pleasant way for me, even if it is subtle. And then we have this guy here, and again, I'm not sure what this is doing. Okay, so just a little rhythmic thing, and then it changes. And then it waits a little bit, and then... All right, and so it's just adding a little bit of rhythmic interest every now and then, and the pattern kind of changes. It's every other. So it does this, and then it does. All right, and when we, again, put it back in with everything here, all right, and it's just adding a little bit of rhythmic interest every here and there. It's not supposed to necessarily stick out or grab your attention necessarily. It's just adding a little bit of rhythmic flair to the song. And then we have hi-hat 7 here. Which is doing a pretty simple thing here. Every now and then. Again, not happening all the time. And it's just to add a little bit of, again, variety as the song goes, just to keep it interesting. And when you layer them all together, right? And so there you go. And then the last thing we have here, well, not the last thing, but this is a shaker part that's happening here. Does that change here? A little bit. All right, and so just doing that constant sort of thing there. And then when we play all of this together, again, we get this. All right. And so that's just kind of a way to bring in this intro. And this is going to change later in the song. But this is just like the first verse. And then I think I added a loop. So this is a loop that somebody else made that I put into this song. And this is what it is doing. All right, and I just thought it was cool. Yeah, it added a little bit of a hip hoppy vibe, I think, to the song, which I was digging. And so you can sort of hear that comes in a little bit as a song sort of evolves and gets going a little bit. And so if we play this whole beginning again. All right. And then this would be where the chorus comes in. And then we have our kicks and things like that. Also, I also bring in a real kind of real sounding drum kit here. So up to this point, it's been pretty electronic-y sounding with the drums, right? And then here, right as the chorus is about to come in, I think we do a little bit of a drum fill, and then with these real drums, and then I keep this snare sample going. Or is that a kick? Okay, well, these are kicks. So I bring in kick samples and snare samples, and this is what it would sound like. All right, and then we're getting into the second verse, but let's cover this chorus real quick. So, so this is what the actual drums sound like, the more like acoustic-y drum sounds. And again, these are like, these are drum samples. This was not a real drummer playing this. This is something I played on a keyboard essentially, and then put in here. But you can hear what it's kind of what's going on here. All right, and so we've got our kick, our snare, toms, overhead, rooms, and things like that. And you can kind of hear what things are doing. So we've got our kick going. I guess I might as well have that on. And this is what our kick is doing. All right. And one thing, I guess, some things I ought to draw your attention to is the fill that happens. It's coming in right before the chorus hits. And again, I think when I was going over how to use toms and things like that and how to do drum fills, essentially this is breaking up the beat for a moment and introducing a new section of the song. And it's kind of grabbing your attention for a moment and then it settles into kind of a regular drum groove. Then there's a short little kind of snare fill thingy there. Nothing crazy. And we add in our toms here. You can see what they're doing. All right. And you can see that these are actually happening on like 30-second notes or whatever. It's not super important, but you kind of get. Yeah, I'm just trying to give you an idea of how you use these elements in order to create some interest as your song is going. So you have these a little bit of a fill going in here, and then I think the hi-hats it's an open hi-hat, and I think it's just going on like eighth notes. Then you can hear some crashes as well going on emphasized beats. So you're getting kind of an idea of what this drum kit is doing. Excuse me. And then we have a fill going into our next verse, and we'll get into that in just a second. So it's relatively short chorus, and so there's not a whole lot of craziness happening with these drums. Just a couple of little small fill to bring it in. There's I even hesitate to call it a fill, but like that changes the drum pattern exceptionally briefly in the middle, again, just to make it a little bit more interesting and keep it from sounding too monotonous. And then another fill to introduce the next section of the song, which is the second verse. And then what I've done is I've taken these acoustic drums and then I've layered on some electronic kicks and some electronic snares. And so, again, here's just the kick. So that's the kick from the acoustic kit just by itself, and then here's an electronic kick. Has kind of like an industrial sound to it, I guess. I don't know. And then here's another kick that I layered on. And then when you have all of them playing at the same time, all three of these kicks. And then when you have, and then I've layered the snares. We've already heard these, but here's what the snares from that, the electronic snares sound like. And then the other snare. And then together. And then those are playing with this snare by itself. And so when we layer all three of those together, we're getting and the reason I have these going on in the section is really to keep this electronic-y vibe going. That's my thought process anyways. You tell me whether I succeed or not. But I wanted to keep this sort of electronic-y vibe going so these drums didn't seem out of place, essentially. I wanted to sort of fit them in with what's already going on here in this verse. And so I kept these in order to kind of keep that same sort of vibe so it didn't feel like these drums just came out of left field. Even though it's a new sound, I still wanted to try and get them to feel like everything kind of belonged together. And so when we have everything going together, And you'll notice that once the chorus hits, I take out all this hi-hat, shaker, loopy stuff and just keep it more acoustic drums, but with the same, like this electric vibe going with the kick and the snare. And again, that's just to kind of keep it tied together a little bit. All right, and then once we get into the second verse, the acoustic drums are gone, and then I'm adding a new kick here. This kick 3. This is being added into the mix here. All right, on top of these drums here, or these kicks. And I think I was adding that to add a little bit of extra punch to these. Just without it. This is with it. So again, it's subtle, but I've brought in a third kick here just on this bit of this the first half of the second verse, and we bring it in again later, but it only comes in for a short bit here, and then it goes away. And then and then we've brought in a new loop here. So this loop here from the first verse is gone, and we've introduced a different loop for the second verse, and this is what that sounds like. Now, it's similar to this loop over here, but it's not the same. And again, a loop is something that somebody else, it's a pre-made repeating pattern, if you will, and it can be drums, it can be bass, piano, it can be anything. It's just a repeating pattern that happens over and over and over again. Generally speaking, loops, like you could consider this to be a loop, this part here. Let's unmute that. But you can consider this a loop. So you can consider that a loop. It just kind of repeats over and over and over again as it goes. This just happens to be a loop that somebody else made. I had nothing to do with this. Somebody else made this loop, and I decided that I liked the vibe it brought to the song. And so, and this is what the first one sounded like, just to give context. And then this is what the second loop sounds like. Still kind of hip-hoppy and whatever, but just a different sort of vibe, right? And so when we hit the second verse, this is what it's going to sound like. All right. And so it's similar to this first verse. What's changed is that now we've added some kicks into the mix, and we have a slightly different hi-hatty kind of loop happening as well, different from this. And so I'm trying to create a subtle difference between the first verse and the second verse. And I also do it with some instrumentation, as we'll get into later. But I'm just trying to create some differences so that the first verse and second verse do not sound like they were just copy and pasted. There's some subtle differences, some distinguishing factors, just different things that will set them apart and, again, keep the song evolving, right? So this the first verse had no kicks in it whatsoever. It's all just hi-hat and snare loop kind of stuff going on as far as the drums are concerned. The chorus introduces an entirely new drum sound with the acoustic-y sounding drums, and gives a little bit more of a different energy, more of a rock energy, and then like a hip-hop-y vibe, like kind of what's going on here. And then the second verse starts off with a kick, which you didn't get in this first verse. And so we're just trying to create some subtle differences. It's got a different loop. And this is going to happen for a little bit. It's a little bit more quiet and subdued for the first half of this second verse. And then the acoustic drums come back in for the second half of the second verse. And so we'll give you a kind of a taste of what that sounds like here. All right, and then we're back in the chorus again. So you can also hear that I'm adding things like some cymbal crashes, some different hi-hat accents somewhere in here. Was that earlier? That kind of open hi-hatty kind of thing. Again, it's just to give the impression that like a real drummer is playing these and not, me just playing it on a keyboard or whatever. I'm just trying to add a little bit of variety and movement to the drums so that it's not stale and monotonous. We've got some crashes to accent some of the downbeats and some of the things. Just adding emphasis, things of that nature. And so we're getting just some different vibes, right? Then we go to the chorus. The chorus is the second chorus is very, very similar to the first chorus. We'll play that for you here. All right, so very similar to the first chorus. The fills are slightly different. They're still kind of keeping within the same vibe, so you may not even notice, but they were not copy and pasted. Each fill is subtly different between the choruses, and that's on purpose, again, just to make it feel like it was a human being playing it and not just copy pasted. And so it's subtle things that kind of add up over time. And this is just the drums. We haven't even gotten into all the other instrumentation that's happening, right? And so you start to kind of get what's going on with some of this stuff. And then when we get to the bridge section of the song, the drum beat changes a little bit. The whole vibe of the song kind of changes and comes a little bit more mellow sounding, I guess we'll say. And then we've introduced another loop. So this is a new thing that's coming in and happening, and that sounds like this. All right. And the bridge is also... Do I have any? I guess that's really all that's happening is just that loop, I think, along with a kick and a snare. So if we were to play this section here. All All right, so the bridge is much more sparse. There's much less happening. All that's really happening is this hi-hat loop, and then a kick and a snare, and then I've brought in that third kick here. So there's 3 kicks happening in this bridge section, and that continues to all the way up until the last chorus. And so all right, and now I think we're about halfway through this bridge section, and then I bring in a hi-hat here, just again, to add some variety, to keep it evolving so that it doesn't become too monotonous. And there's a little bit of some build, just kind of creating some subtle differences. Oh, I guess we're also adding a hi-hat even before that here, which is doing something, I'm sure. Yeah, so just doing a little quarter note pattern. And so I'm doing some subtle things. And again, you may not even be hearing this in the full context of the song. You're probably not even aware of it. Most people aren't hearing this kind of thing. But when we start adding in some of these more subtle elements, it's just helping this bridge to evolve as it goes. And this is just on the drums. Right, so we go from that other hi-hat still happening, you're just not hearing it maybe as well. And again, it's subtle things, but it's just some small things that are helping the song to evolve and grow over time, so that it keeps the listener engaged and interested. And then the last thing we'll look at here, as far as just the drums, is this last little section. So we get to the end of the bridge here. So the drums cut out. You know, they've been going more or less for the whole song. Very few spots where there's no drums. Sometimes it's good to have them cut out more frequently, but in this particular instance, it's just this one little spot, and you'll see why when we get into the other instrumentation and other things that are happening in this area of the song. But like I'm saying that to say there's more than one way to skin a cat, and I don't know why that phrase even exists, but you can do things in a lot of different ways. The way I'm doing it here is not the only way to do it. I'm just trying to give you some ideas about how to bring your productions to life. And so this is kind of what I've done on this song. If I was working on a different song, or it was a different genre or whatever, I might approach things differently. But for this, I was going for, certain vibes and stuff. And whether or not you like how this has come out or sounds or whatever is not the important part. It's that you can take some of these ideas and concepts and apply it to what you want to do and how you want your songs to come out. And so things like taking the drums all the way out, or removing kicks or snares or hi-hats or things from different sections, just little ways is subtle, even if it's subtle, just ways to make it so that things are not always the same the entire way through the song. It's going to help create some dynamics, which is really, dynamics is just a fancy way of saying differences between quiet and loud, so that, things aren't the same volume. You can use changes in volume or whatever in order to create some interest. So like there's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm just giving you a few here. So and again, here we come back. So this is this is a chorus section here, and I'll show you when we get there. But this is another chorus section here, and this is what I played you at the beginning. This is what the song actually started off as. This is I created these drums before I did anything else, before adding any other music or anything like that. I kind of came up with this drum groove here, and when I first was working on this song, this drum groove you're hearing played through the entire song. It never changed. It never deviated. It was just what you're about to hear. And so I went back through the song and I started putting in making the changes to the drums so that it wasn't just this all the way through the song. And so it wasn't monotonous. It wasn't boring. It would change and evolve. Now, that being said, I really, really, really like this drum groove, and parts of me kind of do wish that it was in other sections of the song because I really think it's cool. But at the end of the day, I thought it probably served its best purpose being just in this little section. I'm going to call this like a quiet chorus. So like this is a chorus section, and just like what we had with the other choruses, and then the acoustic-y sounding drums kick back in, and then you have like the normal chorus. And so anyways, just play this once more for you. And the difference here between some of the other things, I have both of these hi-hat loops happening at the same time now. Before it was only just one or the other playing. Now it's both of these. So if we were to play this. All right. Aside from that, I think most of the other elements are pretty much doing the same thing that they were throughout the rest of the song. You can kind of consider all this hi-hat stuff to be loops in a very real sense. The kick and the snare, the snares are pretty much on 2 and 4 the entire time. That I don't think is changing at all. The kick patterns are changing throughout the song. Sometimes they're doing a little bit more complicated things. Sometimes they're being simplified. And that's another thing that you can also do when you're working on your productions, is kind of change up where your kicks are hitting in order to create interest or different vibes in different sections. But anyways, here's this this drum pattern here, or this drum section here. This is what the song started with, and it's probably my favorite drum section of the entire song. All right, and then at this point, we've gotten into the last chorus, which introduces the acoustic drums again, and then we have a fill to bring it in again, and then we're... And that's the end of the song. And so you can see the song is constantly changing and evolving as it goes. The drums and the instrumentation to a degree. All of these things are sort of working together in subtle or obvious ways in order to create some movement and some differences as the song is going, so that it's not monotonous, it's not boring, it's not too repetitive. There's creating some interest and things like that. And so that's just things to be aware of as you're creating your tracks, is ways to subtly change drums, whether it's sounds, whether it's patterns, whether it's what's playing when, whether you have kicks or snares or hi-hats, various things, just ways to think about how to keep your song interesting as it goes, and evolving and changing. And so, as you can see, the drums are never kind of doing the same thing too much or too often at the same time, or like as it goes. And so that's just something to be aware of. The last thing we're going to get into when it comes to the drums, and I'm not even sure if this is a drum thing necessarily, but these are called risers and impacts. So a riser is something that is sort of kind of like this sort of sound. It's not always this sound, so but it's kind of like that whoosher. Sorry if I'm really making annoying noises, but anyways. So you can hear it kind of grow and get bigger. And I've layered a couple of different risers on top of each other here. All right, and so when you put the two of them together, you get this. All right. And then we have an impact, and that's just kind of like a downbeat thing, sort of like a crash almost. You can effectively use it as a crash in a lot of cases. And then when we play those with our drum track, this is what we're getting. And that's leading into the chorus. And so those are happening, generally speaking, before every chorus. I don't like to overuse them typically, but like, again, sometimes you can. It's really to taste, but it's just subtle ways to lift their song and kind of create some tension before a big section or even a quiet section. You can like do a what you can call a fake out build if you want. So you can build, and then instead of building to something big, you can build to, sorry, I just bumped my mic. But instead of building to something big, you can build to something small and quiet. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this technique, but in this case, I'm using it to sort of create a little bit of tension and build before heading into the chorus. And so here's the second chorus section. And then here's the last little section. So this is like the quiet chorus going into the big chorus. All right. And so I've used that trick, I guess you can call it, in order to just build into the chorus and make it big. So that's what the drums are doing. I'm sorry I'm not going into like a huge amount of detail as to like, the kicks and whether they're being played on like the ones and threes and stuff like that. You can kind of analyze them if you want. Maybe we can like zoom in and you can sort of see what's going on. But the kicks are kind of changing section to section as to what they're doing. Like for this versey section here, they're just kind of doing a right. So it looks like, so if this is your one right here, your beat one of your bar, you've got the kick happening on beat one, and then nothing, 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 and then we're bringing it on the and of three, the and then so it's the and of three, and then it's the one E, it's the E. So if we zoom into 16th note mode here, one E and 2. So it's the and of 3, the E of 4, and then we're back to the 1. So it's really just 1 and the E. Relatively simple for the versey kind of section here. For the chorus section, the kick is happening on the one, the and of one. So the one, the and of one, the and of two, the 1E of two, and then I think the 1E and of two, or three, I'm sorry. So we got kick here. So boom, 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 ba boom. So one and then we've got a rest here, and then we've got it coming in on the 1E and of bar 2, and then the 1E of bar 3, the and of bar 3. And then the 1E of beat 4. And then we're back to here. And I think it changes a little bit as it goes. So it's not just this boom, 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 ba boom, boom thing. It changes a little bit. Right. And so, again, when I'm making music, I'm not generally speaking, thinking about that kind of thing. I more feel it out. Like I said, I was playing this on a keyboard and just sort of vibing. I wasn't drawing it in, as I've shown you in other videos, but the idea is it's not always the same thing as it's going through the song. And even in this chorus section, which is where we're kind of starting it here, it's not the same pattern repeating over and over and over and over again. It's actually changing it rarely. It does a few of the same patterns in this chorus, but it's kind of changing a lot. If you listen again. And then we've changed it here. And then we got the chorus. And then I guess the bridge section is a boom, ba-joom, boom. So it's different here in this bridge section again. So the kick is changing as it goes from between the choruses, the verse, the bridge, and even within the chorus, it's not keeping the same pattern the entire way through. You can keep it the same the entire way through. That's up to you. I'm just trying to give you some ideas, some concepts, some things to think about as you're working on your drum tracks, so that you can sort of create some interest, some variety, and so that things can be a little bit different as things go. And you can do that with kick placements, snare placements, hi-hats. When hi-hats are playing, when they're not, you can add in some loops if you like the way they're sounding or whatever. So like there's a lot of different ways to go about doing this. In this case, I made kind of my own hi-hat loops and then added some pre-made loops as well throughout the song in various places. I've used both electronic-y sounding drums and acoustic sounding drums as well. And then I've tried to tie them in with each other, doing some various things. I've layered some kicks and some snare sounds in order to get something that you wouldn't get if it was just any one thing by itself. Like, for instance, let's say we mute one of these snares here. So like neither of these snares on their own is giving me what I want, but when I add them together, they're giving me more of the vibe that I'm looking for. I've done some syncopation stuff with the hi-hats. I've, made like little glitchy sounds with some things. I've done like some shakery things. I've just putting things together in a way that they vibe. Like, and again, if you take away some of these elements, it's just not giving you the same vibe anymore. So like if I mute all the hi-hats and just keep this shaker, it's just not vibing the same as when we've got these hi-hats going with each other. Right? And then we have some hi-hats that are playing more constant, and then we have some that are being a little bit more sparse and playing more like syncopated things. And we've got it evolving as it goes, so that it's not just the same thing like we're adding in this loop here. So these are all just different ways, you know, using risers and impact sounds, crashes, fills. These are all concepts of how to get your drums to sort of feel a little bit different and whatnot. So these are kind of like the detail stages of what we went over last week, where when I started off with this basic drum groove here, that sounds cool. I really like that. But I think that if I had had that going through the entire song, it would have gotten very stale, very monotonous, very boring. And so, and this is the detail stage. This is where, like I say, okay, what do I need to do to get these drums to sound different? And so, like, this is what I started with. And then as I went through, I used the PDCA process we talked about last week: plan, do, check, and adjust. I'm constantly getting feedback through listening to the song and hearing what's happening and making my decisions kind of based on my feelings or the vibe or whatever that I'm hearing, and adjusting it to create something that is constantly evolving and changing and hopefully more interesting to listen to than just the same thing over and over and over again. Now, I say all that, if you really want to, if you find a drum groove that you love and you just want it to play the same thing the entire way through the song and not change, that's fine. Music at the end of the day is very subjective, and as long as you're getting the vibe, the sound, the feel that you want to out of your song, that's the important part. You don't necessarily have to go through and do everything that I've done here to get a good sounding drum track or whatever. Like, there are other ways. As long as something in your song is changing and over time, that's fine. But in this case, like, I tend to focus very heavily on the drums in my productions, and so I spent a lot of time kind of tweaking these drums and making them sound the way I wanted them to sound, giving them some subtle distinctions, making sure that things were not always the same throughout. So anyways, that's it for the drums.
All right, so I hope that video was helpful. I hope you guys all have a wonderful week. Please let me know if you have any questions about anything we covered today over this production breakdown as regarding the drums or anything like that. And again, if you have anything that you'd like to get more information on in the future, or like topics for videos you'd like me to cover in the future, please let me know in the comments. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.